Hello and welcome to Open Line. I'm Starlene Stringer. Well, the Irving Archives and Museum opened in February of 2020 and due to COVID, within a month, closed its doors. Despite the closure, the work continued and the museum even won an award during the pandemic. Our guests today are Jen Landry, Director of Museums, Kevin Kendrow, Assistant Director of Archives and Collections, and Claire Holfish, Education and Program Manager. They're going to bring us up to date on the museum's reopening and great ways to check out all it has to offer. Thank y'all so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Y'all are welcome. So Jen, let's start with you. The museum has recently reopened its doors to visitors. So let's begin with a quick overview of what's currently available to see.
So when we opened in February, it was just a soft opening. And so the permanent exhibit wasn't completely done. And so now we are finished and everyone can come and see everything at the museum. The permanent exhibit is complete, called the Irving Story. We have a temporary gallery that is hosting a temporary exhibit right now called Apron Strings Ties to the Past. And we have left up the exhibit that you mentioned the award about, India a la Art, which was a collaboration with the Think India Foundation. It was supposed to close in May. Obviously, it had a very short run. And so we worked with Think India and have left it up until January. So hopefully people can stop by to see it. We also have the Smithsonian Spark Lab, which we don't have open yet, although Claire will tell you a little bit more about what we're doing here in a little bit. We are waiting for some special equipment that will help us sanitize everything in that interactive space. And once that arrives, we'll be able to open Spark Lab as well. And there's also a store where you can do holiday gift shopping.
I love it. A lot going on. And we're going to do a deep dive into each of those things a little bit later in the show. But for viewers who might not be familiar, can you give us the backstory of how the museum actually came to be?
So it was 40 plus years in the making. So obviously we were not there for all of that. It really took off here in about 2015 when the city decided that the old Central Library building, the first floor, would make a great place to build the community museum. There's been a long time interest by community members to have the history of Irving highlighted in a museum and have a community space where we could highlight our history and bring in special exhibits and just have a space to, talk about community development and what Irving is all about. And so in 2015, there was a feasibility study, and then we designated the first floor, which is about 22,000 square feet of the old Central Library, and construction got underway in 2017. And we just completed everything here about a month and a half ago.
Wow, 40 years in the making and it's here. I love it. Okay, I want to turn to Kevin for a minute because I know the Archives Division of the Irving Archives and Museum is your specialty. So Kevin, tell us what the community can discover in the archives.
Well, in the archives, we collect the history of the city. So of course that includes city documents, but most of what we get, I would say 90% of what we get, are items that are donated by residents of the city. So this could include the history of schools and churches, of businesses, records from the pioneer families and some of the early Irvingites who moved here back in, the early 1900s. We have records from social clubs, like many garden clubs. There used to be a lot of garden clubs in the city, and they saved their records and donated them to the archives.
It all sounds fun and fascinating. We'll have to check that out. And Claire, I would love for you to tell us about your role as the Education and Program Manager, because I bet you have some really exciting things in the works.
Indeed. So my role is really to design and implement experiences that engage and empower museum visitors. So programs and other initiatives, whether that's for families, adults, community partnerships, and of course, K through 12 students and educators.
Wonderful. Now, Jen, I want to go back a bit. Let's dig into the heart of the museum because your permanent exhibit called The Irving Story is a big deal. Tell us why it was important to explore Irving's history this way.
So I mean, it was always the vision for the museum to really be able to tell that story. And we wanted to do it in a way that isn't your traditional history museum. We wanted to make sure that it was something engaging and a different experience than maybe what you'd encounter in a historic house or historical society. But that story is really a great reflection of American history. And so obviously with K through 12, meeting standards in education, that story fits in really well for educators to be able to tell Irving's kind of window of the American story. But it also allows people that maybe aren't from Irving to come in and make a connection too. But if you're from Irving or have moved here recently, you find lots of things there, lots of memories. A lot of the people that have come through so far, talk about how it's made them think about, things in Irving's past and, kind of reignited memories in their own minds about what Irving's history has looked like. And we've changed so rapidly that it's really just important to be able to give some context of where we've been to help us think about where we're going. And that's the real role of history, right? Is to help give us context and help us make good decisions for the future.
Exactly. All right, Kevin, I want to come back to you because I would love for you to walk us through the exhibit. I mean, what do visitors see first?
Well, we've divided Irving's history into basically 3 chapters. There's the pioneer and early days of Irving. Then Irving abruptly in 1950 became a suburb, went from being a small town, little farm town, to being a suburb. And then about 15 or 20 years after that, with the arrival of the airport and Las Colinas, we sort of became an independent city that we stand on our own, have our own identity. So when you first enter, the first section of the museum covers the pioneer days, which are say from 1850 to 1900, prior to the time Irving was established. And we also cover from the founding of Irving in 1903 up to about 1950. And during that period of time, Irving was really just a little small farm town located between Dallas and Fort Worth, had roughly 2,000 people. So that's what's covered in the first chapter, and a type of display you might see when you first come in is the inside of a log cabin. And we tell the history of the early farming communities that grew up prior to Irving's founding, such as Sowers and Bear Creek and Kit. We talk about some of the pioneer families, such as the Haleys and the Stories. One of the artifacts in the museum, in this little section I'm talking about, is a rocking chair that the Story family brought down with them from Illinois when they moved here back in the late 1850s.
Wow.
There's also a feature, it's an audio feature, where we had voice actors reading letters that were written by William Haley and his wife, who moved here in 1857. So we had the voice actor actually reading the original letter that they wrote back home to Missouri. So it's a really good effect for putting you in the mindset of what it was like to be one of the early pioneers in Irving.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds very interesting. And Jen, I know you've incorporated different ways of engaging with the information. Why was it important to include a variety of ways to connect with the exhibit?
There's a lot of different kinds of museum visitors, and we love them all, but we want to make sure that they all have a good experience. And so we have little nicknames for them. Some are breezers, who like to just kind of pick up the big pieces of the story. Others are browsers or kind of pickers, where they like to dive into different places, but maybe not into everything. And then there are the researchers, who I guess probably would describe the three of us. And we like to read lots of things in museums and really dive into the topics. And so we made sure that we had ways for all of those visitors to have a good experience and to come away with the big picture of what Irving is all about. So like Kevin mentioned, there are media elements. So there's audio from oral histories and letters that we've had voice actors, actually members of the community, do the recordings of, so you can kind of hear first person accounts of experiences of people that have lived in Irving. There's also slideshows and videos. We have a reenactment of the auction in 1903. And then we have a lot of images of large murals on the wall. So if you would just look at the pictures, you'll get kind of a sense of what Irving is all about. And then we have, you know, the traditional label text, introductory text on walls, and then smaller label panels that dive into different parts of the story. And so there's just multiple layers. So you can spend 3 hours going through the permanent exhibit, or you can spend 20 minutes. We just wanted to make sure that everyone would have a good experience. And like I said, there is no right or wrong way to visit a museum. And so we wanted to make sure that we reached all those people.
I love it. I'm glad you clarified that, because I was thinking to myself, man, am I a breezer or browser? I was like, which one am I? So I'm glad they're all good. Okay, Claire.
Some days you may be a breezer and some days you may be a researcher.
That's right. You can change it up. I love it. And you know, Claire, I want to come to you because I know there's different kinds of programs. What kind of programs do you envision around the permanent exhibit?
Sure. So, you know, when designing programs, we really look at a number of factors. So things, what's going on in the community, maybe what's going on in current events. And we look for ways to tie that back to the exhibit. So, you know, naturally in time, we'll have things like your standard tours and family days, but we're also in a unique opportunity now because it is our first year. We can kind of experiment with programs, try things out. And really take our cues from visitor feedback to build a suite of programs that's really responsive to what the community needs and wants.
That makes sense. So Kevin, I want to come to you now because the story of Auction Day in Irving is something you highlight very well. Can you tell us about that part of the exhibit?
Yes, so of course Irving was launched. This might be a little too much detail, but it was December 19th, 1903. And the way they launched the town was through a lot auction, and they advertised it throughout the county, and they ran a special train from Dallas to Irving, Irving's brand new, yet to be completed railroad depot. The train came to it, and about 150 people were there for the auction. The founders of the town created a really big plat map. It's about 13 feet long and 6 feet tall. And on this, and it's made of cloth. It's a cloth map. And on it, they drew a plat map of the city that shows the residential lots at the time, the business lots, the streets and alleyways. And they hung this giant map on the side of the depot. So when the auctioneer was auctioning a certain lot, he would point to which lot was being auctioned off so people could envision where in the layout of the town the lot they might buy was going to be. So what we've done is we've created a scaled down version of the depot. And as Jen just mentioned, part of that exhibit, there is a screen, a video screen that's in one of the doorways of the depot. And on it through video, and it's a very good video if I do say so myself. It tells through newspaper articles, photographs, and a narration that we've created that is given by Otis Brown's wife. And Otis Brown was one of the founders, and his wife was there on the day of the auction.
Interesting.
He narrates the events that happened that day. So it's a very engaging video.
Sounds like it, for sure. You know, I want to ask Jen about something else there. In addition to that, I understand there's a 1950s style kitchen included. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So Kevin had mentioned the cabin from the frontier period that, you know, has a pretty basic setup with just a fireplace and a table. And so we wanted to kind of give a contrast to that. I mean, one of the things that as humans, we can connect with history of change through time. And so we wanted to highlight a suburban kitchen, which was part of Irving's heyday in suburbia period, was when all these mass developed homes started to come in, and Irving's population exploded in the 1950s and 60s and into the early 70s. And that's a very good example of how suburbia developed in all parts of the country. And so the kitchen really highlights the conveniences in theory that developed, from plastics to, you know, electrified homes, you know, your electric range, all the appliances and conveniences that, you know, we recognize today. And we have found in past exhibits, and certainly in the Ruth Payne House, people connect with the kitchen because we all have memories of it, whether it was your home kitchen when you were growing up, or for some of us, our grandparents' kitchen. Mm-hmm. You know, when you see that Formica table and some of those appliances, you immediately think of those times, you know, in your own lifetime. And so we wanted people to be able to make that connection, because that's when people really kind of get history, is when you can make a personal connection to it. One of my favorite quotes was from one of the Levitt brothers, who, you know, kind of pioneered mass development housing. And it's, he said that with all these modern conveniences, what will the ladies do with their extra 3 hours a day? And so that the kitchen kind of captures that. You know, we're all still looking for those 3 extra hours, but but I mean, it kind of captures that moment of, you know, how all this wonderful new technology was going to save us lots of time.
Wow, that is interesting. I had to laugh at that one. But yes, where are our 3 hours? Okay, I could talk to y'all about this all day. It's so great, but we do have to wrap up this section. And Kevin, let's do that by talking about the airplane. Why was it important to highlight aviation as part of the Irving story?
Well, one of the major events in Irving's history was the development of DFW Airport right there on the western boundary of the city of Irving. And it was gigantic in transforming Irving from this suburb that Jen was just talking about into a freestanding independent city. It brought jobs to the city. It turned Irving from a bedroom community into a community where people would come to Irving to go to work. And it also transformed Irving into an international transportation hub. Because of its proximity to the airport and the development of the Las Colinas development, many businesses decided that Irving would be a very convenient place to set up their headquarters, they would set up their headquarters or their regional offices, and in some cases, their worldwide offices. And it's all because of the proximity to the airport. So the history of the airport is huge in Irving's overall history.
Definitely. Thank you. And Claire, let's talk about another new exhibit, apron strings.
Yeah, so apron strings is one of our traveling exhibits. It features aprons dating from the 1900s through the present day, really chronicling the changing attitudes towards women and towards domestic work. For me, what's really remarkable is for such a maybe utilitarian, simple item of clothing, just how much it's imbued with memory and nostalgia. Walking through the exhibit, you know, each apron kind of tells its own story and history. So.
Interesting. Okay, so are there actually programs that are around the apron strings exhibit?
So one thing we did was put a call out to the community to see if people were interested in loaning us their aprons. And we got quite a few responses and have a lovely community wall featuring aprons from Irving, each with an individual story. So that's wonderful. We also have decorate your own apron kits available. We have options for adults and children available for a nominal fee. So it would make a really great, family activity to do at home, decorate your own apron.
That sounds like a lot of fun, definitely. Okay, Jen, I want you to tell us about something else exciting there, and that is about the India a la carte exhibit. How did that exhibit come about?
India a la Art was our opening show in February. It was in conjunction with a nationally traveling show from the Smithsonian called Beyond Bollywood. We wanted to add a community component to that traveling show. And so we collaborated with Think India Foundation and basically turned over our community space to them to curate an exhibit. And they really set the bar for that space high. They did an amazing job developing an exhibit that looks at India through the eyes of material culture and the arts and dance and poetry. There's a community art component where artists have contributed pieces, reflecting Indian culture. And it's just an amazing, colorful, rich show. And we love how it kind of embraces the permanent exhibit architecturally. And so it's sort of a reflection of Irving's past and our present and future. So the diversity of our community and allows us to highlight just the wealth of tradition and culture that we have in our city. And that recently received an award from the North Texas Business Council of the Arts called the Obelisk Award. So that collaboration received recognition, and we are humbled and honored to receive an award so early on in our project, but really feel it's a great recognition of the fact that we're on the right track in terms of being able to embrace the community. I mean, we really envisioned this being a community museum. And so that's really what India a la Art's all about.
Wonderful. And we're almost out of time, but there's another great collaboration I'd love for you to tell us about, Claire, and that is the Spark Lab.
Yes, so the original Spark Lab's actually at the Smithsonian at the Lemelson Center for Invention. And there's satellite locations all over the country, and we're very fortunate to have one in Irving. So the Spark Lab is a center for with lots of open-ended activities that really, provide the visitor with an opportunity to be an inventor and understand the invention process, that it's not just one aha moment, that anyone can be an inventor and think like an inventor. So right now, as Jen mentioned earlier, our lab is temporarily closed while we await for our Zono cabinet, which will keep the materials safe for our visitors. But there's some virtual opportunities online. If you go to the Smithsonian site, they have some open-ended challenges that you can do on Tinkercad, which is a 3D design program. And we also have available Spark Lab to-go bags for any of our visitors who take advantage of our reservation. They can take a project bag home.
That's neat, being able to take part of it with you, a little Spark Lab to go. You guys, we are just about out of time. So in closing, I would like for each of you, I should say, because I haven't been there yet, I can't wait to go, but I'd like for each of you to tell us why everyone needs to visit. And we'll start with you, Kevin.
One good reason to visit is to have some fun and learn something along the way. Irving, you just kind of think of it as being part of this big metroplex, but when it was first established, it has its own unique history. It has its own unique characters, the people who helped shape it and made it grow and become what it is. It's all very unique to Irving. Irving has its own story. It will be fun. Check it out.
Thank you so much. And Claire, what would you like to add to that?
I echo everything that Kevin said, but I think for now, you got to come visit and see the gift shop. We did it up for Christmas. It looks great.
You're a woman after my heart, the gift shop. And Jen?
Certainly Kevin captured, what makes Irving so special. But I think right now, one of the great things we have is our safety protocols we have in place, where we have set up what we're calling Bring Your Bubble. And so we are only open by reservation right now. And when you make a reservation, you define your bubble. So for some of us, that's, our nuclear family in our household. For others, maybe it's a set of grandparents too, or, maybe you have a small social circle of friends that have agreed to follow all the same safety protocols. Or maybe you're part of an education pod where, you're sharing the remote education with other parents. And if you make a reservation, you will be the only group at the museum. And
Wow.
So you know exactly who you're going to encounter. And what that allows us to do is, one, it gives us a chance to reassure visitors that they know what to expect and who they will come in contact with. It also allows staff, we give one orientation. We're not actually giving any tours. We're just helping guide visitors, tell them what to expect. And then they are allowed to roam through the museum themselves. We're available for questions, but that limits the amount of contact staff have to have with visitors as well.
I love it. So what you just said is it's safe, fun, and educational. Thank you, and congrats to you all for creating a museum that Irving can definitely be proud of. We look forward to more exciting exhibits in the future, and we thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for watching. I'm Starlene Stringer. Please be sure to tune in Thursday, January 14th for the next edition of Open Line. We'll see you then.